Hello again, welcome back to Chinese brush painting for beginners. I'm going to demonstrate today this picture of fish in a river. I'm going to start by looking at the materials we'll need to complete this painting, and then I'll work through the demonstration of the painting step by step. So let's look at the things we'll need to do this painting. To start with, you'll need some Chinese painting paper, or rice paper sometimes called. I'm using for this demonstration a paper called Wenzhou painting paper. That's spelt W-E-N, new word, Z-H-O-U, Wenzhou paper. You could use another paper. The important thing is that it's an unsized, an absorbent paper. So not one that's got a heavy glue coating on it. You want one that's unsized and a Chinese paper. This one has two distinct surfaces, a rough surface and a smooth, very much smoother surface. If you're using this particular sort of paper, you want to paint on the rougher surface. The other things that you will need are some kitchen paper, an absorbent surface to work on. I'm using felt here. You could use any sort of absorbent cloth, and you know, you could put your some pieces of kitchen paper down if you wanted to use that. If you haven't got an absorbent cloth. You'll need some paper weights. You'll find some paper weights of some sort helpful. And you will want some ink. Now you could use some ink that you prepare using a stone and a stick, just to refresh your memory from the demonstration I did earlier. We can mix the ink up using water and grinding the ink stick on the stone and produce the ink that way. But for today's demonstration, I'm going to be using some bottled ink, which is quite convenient and easy to use. The one I'm using here is called, the brand is called E de Ge. E is spelt Y-I, de D-E, and Ge, G-E, E de Ge. It doesn't have to be that brand, so long as it's a Chinese painting ink that you're using. So I've put a little bit out into a clean container there, ready to use. You'll also want a brush, a Chinese painting brush. I've got 3 different types here. You only need one to do the demonstration, but just to show you the different types, I've got a dark haired brush, a white haired brush, and a mixed haired brush there. They're all about 2.5 to 3 centimetres hair length. So any sort of Chinese painting brush of that size will be fine for this painting. I'm going to use the white haired one today, but it doesn't really matter which one you use. You will also need some sort of palette or plate. If you are going to try this demonstration with colour, the colours I will be using are yellow. The brand that I'm using is Marie's, and so the yellow I'm using in this particular brand is numbered 218. I'll also be using a blue. This one is indigo blue, and in the Marie's colours it's labelled 495, number 495, but you may have a different brand that has a different numbering system. And the last one is a reddish brown, which is a burnt sienna, number 684. So if you're looking to use some colour that isn't the Marie's brand, you want a yellow, a dark blue, or more properly called indigo blue, and a reddish brown, or more properly called burnt sienna. So those are the three colours that I'm going to be using. So let's get our paper ready. I've got my paper cut down to A4 size. So you'll want, if you're going to follow this through, you'll want a couple of sheets of A4 sized paper to follow the demonstration, and a further piece that's just a scrap piece to do a bit of practice on. So I'm going to start the painting by painting the fish. So let's get the paint out and start putting the fish into the painting. So I'm using some of the brown, burnt sienna. If you're using a different colour than this, if you're using watercolours, it's best if you can find a paint that has some sort of body to it that you can squeeze out onto your palette, rather than one that's in a cake or a block, because ideally we want to use the paint slightly sticky. You can see I've wet my brush, so it's ready to use. I've taken a little bit of that moisture out of the brush, and then I'm loading the paint, but I'm not loading it with too much water. I'm keeping some of that stickiness in the paint so that it doesn't, you know, it's not like a thin watercolour wash type consistency. There is some body or thickness to the paint, and this will make it easier to do the painting. I'm then going to put a little bit of ink onto the tip of the brush, just a tiny bit, and work that into the brush tip. So we've now got some brown and some ink in the tip there, some mixed in with the paint that's on there. I'm then going to put a further little tiny touch of ink into the very tip of the brush again, and mix that in not quite so much, so that we've got water, brown paint mixed with the ink, and ink right on the tip. And if we perhaps have a little practice go at the fish on our scrap piece of paper first. You should see a variation in the colour coming through when we do the stroke. So to paint the body of the fish, I'm just using a simple sweeping action with the brush. So let's just have another look at that stroke again. So we land the brush in a continuous movement and lift off again. And this should give you that sort of long stroke that we need to do the fish. So let's start putting that on the painting. If we go back and look at the finished painting, you can see that I've arranged the fish in a group of 3 and then a further fish that's sort of tagging along behind. The reason for this is it means we've got a larger group and a small one here, and this gives the eyes something to compare, which makes for a better painting. The other thing to notice is that all the fish are swimming in the same direction. The Chinese say fish should be looking for the same food to get a painting that looks attractive to the eye. So we need to bear that in mind when we do the placement of the fish. So I'm getting my piece of paper laid out with a couple of paperweights there. Probably put one at the bottom as well. And let's just bring the camera in so that you can see more easily. So I'm going to refresh the amount of paint on the brush. So we work into the brown, little tiny dab of ink on the tip of the brush and work that in a little bit, and then re-tip with a little bit more ink and not work that in quite so much. Now you can use a fingernail mark to put the position of the fish on your paper to give you a bit of a guide. So there's the 3 and there's the one over here on its own, and we can make those strokes then. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you'll notice that I'm holding the brush in the special grip for Chinese painting. So we need to hold the brush 2 fingers behind the brush, 2 in front, and then bring the thumb in so that the brush can be used in this special way that's unique to Chinese painting. So let's now look at putting a little bit more detail on these fish. So I've put just a tiny bit more ink into the tip of the brush, and I'm going to put some fins and tail pieces onto the fish, and I put the brush on and press and move it towards the fish. Press, move towards the fish, press, move towards the fish, press, move towards the fish. I'm only pressing very lightly with the brush tip. that last little one over here. Now we want to put in the detail. So I'm going to put a little bit of more ink on the brush, but before I do, I'm going to blot my brush with a bit of kitchen towel. To get out the moisture there, so that it's quite dry. Right, so having removed some of the moisture from the brush, put a little bit in the tip. And I make an eye dot. And a little line for the underside of the body. And here I'm using just the very tip of the brush to put in these details. So there's our fish swimming along. The next thing we want to look at are the leaves. So I'm going to rinse my brush out. And prepare the colour for the leaves. So going back to our paint, we want some of the yellow, and some of that dark blue, now you may find you need to dab a little bit of the moisture out of the brush with a bit of kitchen towel, but don't take all of it out this time because we want to have a little bit more flow to the paint. So this at the moment is a little bit too sticky, so I'm going to add in a little bit of water with my finger to create a bit more liquid there. So just a drop of water off my finger to make that a little bit more liquid. You want something that's going to flow a little bit this time. And then I'm going to add in blue onto the brush. And again, I've got yellow, then the blue, and then I'm going to put this time a little bit of that extra blue on the tip of the brush so that we get a variety of colour in the brush. Now let's go back to that scrap piece of paper and just practice one or two leaf strokes. So again, checking that you're using the traditional Chinese grip for the brush. we can make the leaves either with one stroke or two. I've used two here, but we put the brush down and you can this time press the whole of the brush onto the page before you lift. There's one stroke, there's the second one. So side by side to make the leaf shape. So we can put the leaves onto our painting, but we just need to consider where they're going to go. So if you look at how I've arranged them in this painting, you can see that we've got three distinct groups. We've got one here coming diagonally across the painting, a smaller one above the main group of fish here, and a third one between this first group and the last little fish. So we've got 1, 2, 3 groups of leaves. And this is important to make the painting look more interesting. And you can see that they all sort of, again, follow the main direction of the fish, running basically diagonally across the painting. So let's put those into our painting now. Now, if you find that your brush stroke is breaking up a lot because it's too dry, just put a few drops of water onto your brush, again using your finger, so that you get a little bit more moisture into the brush. And you don't want to reload the brush too often. It's best if you work until most of the paint has gone and then reload. That way you'll get a variety of colour coming through. So I'm just going to put a little bit more blue onto my brush now. I'm dipping it into the water as well to give it a little bit more liquid, more moisture in the brush. So that's that first group of leaves. We can start on the second one here. And again, once the brush starts to get a little bit dry, just drop a few little drips of water on the brush from your finger and carry on so that you don't have to reload for a little bit longer yet. Okay, so that's the second group of leaves done. Let's move the painting over a little bit more and we'll do that third group that comes in between the two fish. And you can see some of the time I'm overlapping the leaves to create more depth in the painting. So the next thing to do would be to put the branches on, but because the painting's wet at the moment, I'm going to leave that step while we look at the calligraphy. So let's have a look at the calligraphy that I've used in this painting while we wait for the leaves to dry. So this is the character for, or word for, good fortune, or fu, good fortune. And it's divided, we can divide it into two halves. We've got the left hand side and the right hand side. So when we paint or draw or write this character or word, we come from the top to the bottom on the left hand side and the top to the bottom on the right hand side. So what I'm going to do is go through that, writing that on that second piece of paper as a practice go before we put it in a smaller size on our painting.